From the horror of the Cyclops scene to the tension of the incredible Trojan Horse sequence, there are many scenes in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey that in my opinion stand out as classic and highly effective sequences in the director's filmography. But after numerous watches of the film, one scene has stuck with me, highlighting the powerful moment of Odysseus' vengeance and acting as one of the best moments of tension and action from the director's films. That particular scene is the killing of the Suitors scene at the very end of the film, and then the powerful moments that follow it. So in this video essay, I'm going to be discussing why the ending moments in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey are perfect, and why it's my personal favourite moment from the film. Before I get into it though, if you want to keep up to date on any of my upcoming content for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. But without further ado, let's dive into the perfect scene from The Odyssey. So there are many scenes in The Odyssey that absolutely stand out in different ways, whether they thrill you, move you, or make you feel the horror of individual moments. For me, the Trojan Horse sequence was an incredibly tense moment that, alongside the scene I talk about in this video, is one of my absolute favourites from the director's filmography. Then there's all the horror captured within the Cyclops scene that puts that in contention as well. But I think there's no scene better in this movie than the slaying of the Suitors scene at the very end of the film. The killing of the Suitors sequence is the moment where everything in the film finally detonates, morally, emotionally, and cinematically. And Nolan treats the scene not as a moment of heroism, but as the most volatile collision of civilization, trauma, justice, and myth in the entire story. Throughout the film, it emphasises the ancient moral code of Zeus's law in that you should treat every stranger as if they might be a god in disguise. And the Suitors violate this law completely as they abuse hospitality, exploit Penelope, threaten Telemachus, and turn Odysseus' home into a place of cruelty. The massacre in a way becomes the brutal restoration of that law and the reassertion of civilization through a single moment of violence. Furthermore, Nolan doesn't just shoot the massacre like a triumphant action set piece because he shoots it as a tense moral reckoning. And the reason I say this is because the director doesn't just wrap everything up in a traditional way following the fight. He uses the fight to show how Odysseus' internal conflict becomes external in showing the cost of violence. In typical Nolan fashion, I'm going to start at the very end of this scene because that's where we get all the narrative meaning and payoff. During Odysseus' final conversation with Penelope in the moments that follow the fight with the Suitors, the conversation becomes a confession by Damon's character. What he says is not just about the long, painful years he spent trying to get home, but about the guilt he still carries from the events that took place at Troy. And all of this links into the reveal with Zendaya's Athena, which I have talked about in length in other videos. But anyway, he tells Penelope that he won't die from his injuries, choosing exile as a kind of self-imposed punishment for slaughtering the Suitors. He knows their families will be furious, which echoes what happens in the final chapter of Homer's epic poem, and he refuses to let that violence spark another cycle of revenge against Ithaca. Nolan changes his ending a bit to provide more symbolic meaning for what's to come, and he shows that with the final few flashes of Odysseus and Penelope chasing the escaping sun, and then by showing Telemachus as the new king left to rule Ithaca. Odysseus is off to bury his fallen crew, but he's also seeking closure to all of his grief in the unknown West. His final words then include him expressing his hope for civilization to rise again, and that their mistakes will eventually fade as they will be forgotten. So it reminds us of Odysseus' violent past and the weight he continues to carry, but it also acts as a moment of personal growth. By removing himself from Ithaca, he gives his people the space to heal, and he attempts to heal himself. In a way, Nolan has taken the position that the people who messed up should move on to allow the future generation a chance to make things right. In mentioning all of this symbolic meaning in the final moments of that scene, it's true that this payoff only works if you deliver on that fight itself against the Suitors. At the very start of it, when Odysseus manages to string his bow, I think this might now be one of my favourite moments in a Christopher Nolan film. The bow itself gives double meaning to the revelation scene, for the beggar's success not only implies his true identity as Odysseus, but reveals his inherent superiority to the suitors. They all fail at stringing the bow, and after all the abuse they throw his way, he ultimately succeeds. For the audience, the bow's associations recall Odysseus' preeminence in Ithaca before the Trojan War, recalling the days when there were no suitors and Odysseus' rule was unchallenged. It's also quite the emotional moment because the film cuts almost instantly to the reaction of Penelope when he does pluck it. All of the small things that Nolan and his creative team add to this scene give it that extra emotional and narrative punch that I think make it one of the most iconic in his filmography. Also, I think the way Nolan and his sound editor mix the score with that bow pluck is a chef's kiss moment. In the score, you hear the bow sound only twice before being successful on the third try, and that is where the sound of the moment is then raised. Yes, on one side it communicates the exact point that things are about to go down, but it's also the way it makes you feel after seeing the whole journey unfold and knowing about his history with that bow. I feel like it's one of those moments where reading it in the epic poem is thrilling, but then seeing it unfold on the biggest screen just elevates the moment to another level. And speaking of thrilling, the way Nolan then shoots the action in this scene is quite simply breathtaking. Now, I've seen a couple of people online complaining and using small clips of Odysseus firing his bow, saying that he's not doing it right or that it looks odd. For one, Matt Damon has gone on record saying that he spent months and months learning to speed load a bow, and that the way he fires it in this scene with a short draw is actually quite realistic. A high tension bow at relatively shorter range is shot exactly like this. It's also set in a smaller room, the bowstring has high tension, and the targets are mostly only a few feet away from him. He has no need to fully draw the bow out when firing, and he only fully draws it when he shoots through the axes because that was further away and he had a bit more time. Anyway, I think the moments where Odysseus does take down the suitors captures all the tension of that moment perfectly, and Nolan is one of the masters at being able to have scenes that have quick shots and use them in the right way. The scene fluently builds with all the rising music, and there are also obstacles throughout that make it feel more tense and cinematic. By the time you get to this point in the film, you want to see Odysseus take down the suitors who have been abusing his home and family. And not just that, you want Telemachus to have his moment against the suitors too. We see that through him defeating the traitorous Melanthius in the storeroom, and it's because Telemachus is the one who's dealt with it all for so many years. So I think the director did a great job of cutting between Odysseus and Telemachus in this scene and using the action to frame that full circle moment for Odysseus, or even the coming of age thematic when it comes to Telemachus. Everything the director chooses to show, stage or cut to is not just there to thrill you or look cool, even though it still works on that level, but it's there to serve the culmination of this journey and the characters within it. Finally, the last point I wanted to go into surrounding the action in this scene is how it all compares to the moments in Homer's epic poem, because I think it's actually quite crucial in showing how the director puts character and story above everything, even in an intense scene like this. In the poem, Antinous is the suitor who dies first, but in the film, he is pretty much the last of them to be killed by Odysseus. Nolan made this choice because Antinous is the main face of the suitors, and his being the culminating death feels like a more cinematic payoff. On top of this, because of Nolan's approach to the gods and specifically Athena with her reveal at the end, there's no presence of her in this final fight. In the poem, Athena is disguised as Mentor, provides encouragement at a crucial moment, and stops some of the suitors' spears from hitting them. And of course, Mentor did die a few scenes prior in the film adaptation. While you could argue that it's crazy that Odysseus didn't get hit even more than he did, just focusing on the endless fight makes the whole moment feel more intense, brutal, and ultimately raw. You feel the rage of Odysseus in moments, you also feel his struggle, and you feel the tension of the whole sequence. In speaking of that rawness, this is where Nolan captures the very heart of this scene from Homer's epic poem. The clash in Book 22 is the only true stand-up fight in the Odyssey, and it naturally brings to mind the Iliad, a poem overflowing with battlefield bloodshed. Instead of a battlefield, the confrontation unfolds inside a household with the violence pressed into a domestic setting. And while the scene has its moments of real tension and excitement, it lacks the sweeping scale and heroic weight of the Iliad's legendary duels. This isn't a meeting of renowned warriors locked into epic combat, it's one lone hero clearing his home out of opportunists who have overstayed their welcome. Nolan keeps the feeling of that in the scene and doesn't have the moment feel like it leans into spectacle. He combines an element of thrills with pure narrative and character crescendo, and the aftermath of it is where Nolan's interpretation then becomes truly powerful. The hall is quiet, there are bodies on the floor, and Odysseus stands in the centre of it all, looking injured and empty. Nolan holds on this image, letting the audience feel the weight of what has just happened. It's not supposed to be a moment of triumph, but a moment of consequence. Yes, the Suitors' deaths restore order, but they also reveal how much Odysseus has changed and how far he has drifted from the man who once left Ithaca. The scene becomes the emotional hinge of the film and the moment where the mythic hero confronts the reality that homecoming is not a return to innocence, but a confrontation with everything lost along the way. And this is perfectly bookended by the conversation between Odysseus and Penelope that takes place after. There's no going off to meet Laertes, and there's no confronting the Suitors' parents. But their conversation touches on all of those elements and then the central themes that I discussed before in a fitting way. So I think the killing of the Suitors scene might be one of the most meaningful moments of both action and consequence in a Christopher Nolan film. But that was my video discussing my favourite scene from Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Through action, narrative tension, cinematography, sound, and even practical effects, this scene becomes one of those moments from The Odyssey that I will never forget. It captures exactly how I felt reading the moment in Homer's epic poem, and in terms of movie climaxes in recent times, I think it was one of the very best I've seen. What do you think towards the killing of the Suitors scene in The Odyssey, and do you agree that it's one of the standout moments from Christopher Nolan's latest film? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, alongside what your favourite scenes were in Nolan's new film. For much more videos and breakdowns, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.